It is a real honor to be able to speak here in Butte. I am part of actually the group of folks who've been moving in here. I just relocated to Butte this summer after nearly 18 years in Helena. And I gotta say, this place feels more at home in 8 months than Helena did in 18 years, so thank you very much. This is very much home. It just took me a while to get here, and I plan on it being home for a very, very long time. Couple caveats as we get started. First of all, I am not an economist. I'm not a researcher. As you heard, I'm a lawyer. And what I speak from here today is not a whole lot of statistics and data, but rather my experience practicing law and working on policy at this unique intersect of Montana culture and the industries that influence Montana. I know I was described in the intro as a water rights attorney, and that's a good chunk of what I do, but my practice has focused on water rights, natural resources, land use, and in that I've had the honor of representing a pretty broad cross-section of Montana, working with a lot of agricultural interests, both century-and-a-half-old family ranches and also newer and larger agricultural enterprises in Montana, working with private property owners across the state, again from multi-generational families who've built a long history here in Montana, to newer land users, working on property developments all over the state, anything from single-family homes that are doing family transfers on family ranches to larger developments, including Copper Fox here in Butte, which I think is a really exciting new opportunity for this community. And then also even representing extractive industry, manufacturing, and even recreationalists, working with the Fishing Outfitters Association of Montana. And it's given me this interesting perspective over nearly 2 decades of where we are going as a state and how we got here, and also the opportunities that we have in front of us. So that's the background that I'm speaking to you from here today. With all of that, though, I do want to say I do not speak on behalf of any of my clients. My comments here today are my own. Certainly, any of you who've worked with me in the Capitol know that I don't take clients that I don't believe in, but these comments are my own. So if you don't like them, blame me, not my clients. Finally, my comments here are more global than local about any one particular area of the state. That said, I want to say that I've been using Butte as an example across the state, actually an example of how to do things right. And so a lot of what I'm going to say here today about suggestions for what we need to be doing are things we already know how to do here, so we can take some pride in that. So I want to ask first, when we talk about housing and the housing circumstances we have across the state, how did we get here? And then talk about where we go. So how did we get here? I know that a lot of times when we look at the housing market across the state, it's easy to have a negative view of it. But I argue that our housing situation now is actually the story of our success. And hear me out on this. Where we are at with housing statewide is not something that happened overnight. I know sometimes it feels like that because the conversation has really ramped up in the last year or so, but this is something that has been building over a number of decades, particularly in some of our more high-growth areas like Gallatin County. And that is the product of some demographic changes over a number of decades that really are, I think, stories of how we have succeeded as a state. And I want to highlight 3 of those demographic changes that have been coming. First of all, Montana has an older average population than the nation as a whole. We are living longer, and we're able to do it more in our own homes. And that really is a story of our success, of our healthcare infrastructure that we have as a state, even though certainly it's challenging being a more rural state. The fact that we are able to age in place and do it on our own terms is a success story. But of course, course, that impacts the housing that's available, because as we are living longer and we are staying in our own homes, we're not moving on to different living circumstances that would open up those homes for other folks coming into the market. Secondly, our families and our households overall are getting smaller. We're at an all-time low for a total household size of about 2.5 persons per household. Now, when you combine that with, I think, the third story of our success, and that is an increasing population, you've got more people in this state, but in smaller households, so the demand for housing units is even exponentially more than you would expect just with that steady increase, because we're spread out over a larger number of households. And I argue that our smaller households are, again, a story of our success, because even though agriculture certainly continues to play a huge part in Montana's economy, even developments in that industry have gotten us to the point where we're no longer dependent on kind of producing our own internal large workforce to be successful. And we are able to plan our families better and still support ourselves with smaller families. And finally, that population growth overall. Between 2010 and 2020, Montana's seen a 10% increase between those two census eras in our overall population. During that same time period, though, we've only seen a 7% increase in housing stock. You can't expect us to have that kind of population growth, which really is a success for us, because we are drawing folks in as a state. They see how attractive we are. We have built a state that people want to come home to and that people want to come to and build their lives. And that's something I think that we can all be proud of. But you can't have that kind of population growth and not have your housing stock keep pace with it and expect for the housing market not to end up where it's at. I mean, it does not take a rocket scientist to understand those very simple principles of supply and demand. And when you've got more demand and your supply isn't keeping up with it, we're going to end up where we're at, where we need more houses, and the houses we do have are going at a higher price point. So we've got those three demographic shifts that have happened over a couple decades. And then all of a sudden, about 2 years ago this time, we had a very sudden change that definitely impacted our housing market here in Montana. For years, Montana has built what we like to call the recreation-based economy. The hospitality industry has certainly been a significant industry here in Montana, with a lot of small businesses participating. And we have the Montana Promotions Division within the Department of Commerce that has done things like paper an entire transportation hub in downtown Chicago with beautiful images of Montana. Come visit Montana. We've got buses in Seattle running that are covered with images of Glacier National Park and our beautiful rivers and mountains, because we've wanted to draw people in for years. Come spend your disposable income and your vacation time here in Montana. What's the joke we always say? Come enjoy Montana, spend your money, then leave. And that worked until COVID hit, and all of a sudden these people who had been having to give up 2 and 3 hours of their day every day for commutes into downtown Chicago and into Seattle from the suburbs had the opportunity to work from wherever. So why wouldn't they choose to come live where they had always vacationed, the places they had fallen in love with? And we've seen that play out for sure. Just in the last year, between June of 2020 and June of 2021, Montana saw a 1.6% population increase. We were one of only 6 states to show a population increase. And although I know it's hard to pinpoint, we had the question earlier today about where are these new folks coming from. It's hard to pinpoint where they're coming from. And we all, of course, have those anecdotal stories about the new neighbors coming in from large cities and wherever. But the reality is, we are one of only 6 states to show a population increase. We are seeing some new residents coming in. And again, that is a story of our success. We have successfully sold our state as a place where people want to be. So what do? Again, I think just like where we're at with our housing market is a story of our success, the opportunities we have ahead of us are also a big chance for us to rack up even more successes as a state. But to do that, I suggest that there are 3 things that we really need to do. And these are not big policy initiatives. These are not programs that we need to be implementing. These are attitude shifts that we need to start making at home in ourselves. First of all, we have to face some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Second, we do have to build. There's just no way around that. And third, we have to start saying yes. And I've got a couple suggestions for what we want to say yes to. So facing the uncomfortable truth. That is that Montana is growing and it is changing. And I know that change can be very, very uncomfortable. It is for everybody. And, you know, I know in Montana we are very proud of who we are as a state and the unique culture we have built here. And new folks coming in, external pressures on our economy, and that are certainly playing out in our housing market, can be scary. But they're going to happen anyways. So we have the choice. Either push against them and reject them, and then have them happen to us, or embrace them and then start to shape how that change happens rather than fighting against it. And this is where I've been bragging on Butte across the state, and there have been a couple towns apparently that don't think that they can learn from us. But one of the things that I have been so impressed with, and always have been, I mean, growing up in Great Falls and then moving to Helen, I love to come spend time in Butte, because I think that this town, more so than any other place in Montana, has shown how you can adapt to change and how you can make it work while still preserving what makes you so special and what makes it a place that people want to build a life in. And I hope the rest of the state can really take that to heart. One of the things that has impressed me the most already about the life that we're building here in Butte together is that we embrace all of our history, even the nasty bits. I mean, when I look out my bedroom window in the morning, I can look down on the first fire hydrant that was ever put in Butte on the corner of Galena and Excelsior. I've got houses around me built by employees of the Copper Kings. William Clark's carriage house is just down the street. And some of that's a history to be proud of. Parts of it are uncomfortable, but we've embraced all of it. We've preserved it while we're growing too. It's been really exciting as I go to my office every day in Uptown to see the redevelopment that is happening in some of those old buildings, preserving what's beautiful about them while also developing some new urban living spaces and really making sure we're preserving that character while building on it to take advantage of the opportunities we have coming into us. So that leads me into my second suggestion of we do have to build. And again, I think that's something that Butte actually really understands, I think a lot better than a lot of other parts of the state. Housing trusts, vouchers, housing subsidies certainly are great and in some places are needed. But if you don't have homes for people to actually go in, none of that makes any difference. And we do need to be building at all price points. And again, I'm seeing that play out here. It was interesting early this fall when you looked at available housing stock across the state. There were as many homes for sale in Butte-Silver Bow as there were in Missoula County. And again, I think that's a success that Butte can be proud of because while we've got a need, we're starting to meet that need. If Missoula County, with a population significantly more than us, has the same number of homes for sale and has an even bigger need, they've got some work to do to meet that. And finally, we need to start saying yes. And I've got some suggestions for particularly the things we need to say yes to that start with our attitudes, but before I launch into that list, I want to preface that by saying many of these we already know how to say yes to here. And again, I think that's where Butte's really ahead of a lot of the rest of the state. First of all, we need to say yes to the trades, and Butte does that really, really well. A lot of the rest of the state can learn from that, because the reality is that the world doesn't need more lawyers, I know that, but we don't build without plumbers and electricians and carpenters and tradespeople of all levels. But that's an attitudinal shift that needs to happen too, because I don't know about many of you, but for me, when I was growing up and planning my life after high school, the message that I got was there's one path to career success and financial security, and that's a 4-year degree. And yes, it served me well. I'm in a profession I love and that suits me. But when you look at people coming out of trade schools right now versus someone coming out of, say, law school, the folks coming out of trade schools right now have much better job prospects, are coming out with lower educational debt, are coming into a market where they've got a higher starting salary, and certainly have a career longevity ahead of them. And again, we know that well here. I mean, I live right underneath Montana Tech that is preparing people to go into those trades and into the engineering careers that support those trades. We know that well, and I look forward to that attitude spreading to the rest of the state. Second, we need to be saying yes to new neighbors. And again, that's something that I gotta say, Butte does phenomenally well. Like I said earlier, I have been overwhelmed at how welcome I have been, my partner and I both, here in this community with open arms. Butte's a very proud community with a lot of folks who have deep generational roots here, but you also know how to welcome in new people who are going to add to your community, and that's something that a lot of other places in this state can learn from. And when I say welcoming in new neighbors, it's not just people coming in from new parts of the state and also from even outside of the state, but it's welcoming in neighbors into our neighborhoods that are living in different circumstances than we are. When I am working with developments across the state and going into local government hearings, if a development includes some rental units, includes multifamily, I often hear some statements made by people who I know are not unkind folks, but some statements made about those people who might move into rental units that if the folks who were saying them stopped to listen to themselves, I think they'd be appalled. But again, I think Butte does that really well. I mean, I can reach out my kitchen window, literally, and I can touch a triplex that's next door to us. And we've all managed to build a neighborhood together that works. And I hope some other parts of the state will learn from that, that if you're welcoming in residents at all income levels and in different housing situations, you can build a community that works well together. Third, we need to say yes to housing. And when I say that, it's not just nails and wood. It's saying yes to infill. It's saying yes to density. It's saying yes to housing that is everything from the large lot, single family homes, to very dense building, to multifamily, to redevelopment of existing buildings. And it was so exciting to hear the conversation that happened earlier today with the panel, because again, I think that's something Butte does really, really well that the rest of the state is struggling with. And I want to be clear, when I talk about saying yes to housing and needing to examine our land use regulations and density and infill and lot minimums and things like that, I don't want to oversimplify it, because there's a lot of conversation that pops up in op-eds and things like that about just getting rid of regulation or getting rid of all zoning. That kind of oversimplification is uninformed and is dangerous. There is a place for review, absolutely. But we need to be thoughtful about those regulations that we are putting in place to make sure that they actually serve the purpose of crafting the community that we want, and that we're not just setting up zoning and land use regulations in general to preserve the status quo, but rather to meet the needs we have as a community and to move us forward in a way that is going to be productive for all of us. Bottom line, I am optimistic about where we are headed as a state, and certainly optimistic about where we are headed in Southwest Montana. Our challenges that we have ahead of us really are the story of our success. And the bottom line is, whether we be 5th or 6th generation Montanan or brand new to this state, we all do love it here. And we all do want to build a better Big Sky. We may have some different ideas about how we do that, and that's okay, but we need to embrace those differences and have the conversation about them rather than just rejecting new ideas and trying to preserve the status quo, because that's not going to happen. As I said before, change is going to happen, and it's up to all of us whether we embrace that and help craft that, or that change happens to us in spite of us. And that change starts with our attitudes. It percolates up to the policy that is crafted both in our Council of Commissioners and in Helena, and then hopefully it plays out in our pocketbooks to the benefit of all of us. But I look forward to working with all of you as we move forward as a community. Thank you, and I think we have some time for questions.